Thank you, gentlemen. You may be seated, church. Good morning again. And so happy to be here with you guys. Only on cup number 3 of the coffee, so I should be a little more tame today. So that's good. I see a couple new faces in the audience, so let me introduce myself. I'm Pastor Shay. I'm the youth pastor here at First Christian Church. And I'm super excited that you're here with us today. And I'm really excited because today's a special service. Today is what we call the Cantata. So it's going to look a little different than our other services. I'll preach on a point and the choir will sing. And then I'll preach on another point and the choir will sing. They've been practicing for a while on this. And it's just a really beautiful service. It's a time to just kind of reflect on this idea of what Christmas is all about. So I'm really excited you guys are here. We're going to get started with that. But before we get started, I'll let you guys know that I'm going to do a quick recap. So we've been kicking off our Beyond series, right? And it's our Christmas series. And the first week we talked about faith. And we talked about 2 couples, if you remember. And one of them was Zachariah and Elizabeth. And they were an older couple and they were married. And then we also talked about a younger couple who were engaged. Their names were Mary and Joseph. And they were told and they were visited by an angel, hey, you're going to have a kid. Both of these couples were going to be given children, one in their old age and one at a young age. And they said, hey, also they're not going to be any ordinary kids. You're going to have John the Baptist, the preparer for the Messiah. And you're also going to have Jesus, the Christ, the Son of the living God. Pretty big deal. Okay? And we talked about how they had to raise each one of those children up in a certain faith. They had to have faith in the way they raised up their children, right? And then last week we talked about love and this idea of Mary and Elizabeth just spending months at a time encouraging one another and loving one another. And I showed you guys my letters from my buddy in prison, Chris, and how we get to love on each other probably about once a month. We send each other letters back and forth. And this idea that love has no boundaries, it knows no time. Because you remember in Mary's song, she said it's for generations to generations. And remember, I told you, if I was Mary, I'd have said generations to generations to generations. Past, present, and future. Right? And it's a beautiful thing, this idea of love. And today, during our cantata, we're talking about sacrifice. And this idea, we're really going to focus on the wise men and Mary and Joseph and what they had to sacrifice around this time. But before we get there, I'm going to give it over to the choir. But you guys, while the choir is singing, Matthew chapter 2. That's where we're going to be resting in today. That's where we're going to be reading. So if you want to find your Bible and turn there. If you don't have a Bible, there's one in the back of your seat or under your pew. And grab that. Turn to Matthew 2. And that's where we're going to start. But I'm going to hand it over to Brandon and the choir and let them start us out. So thank you guys. Very good. Don't you just love that? We've been practicing that stuff for a while, and I'm really excited for you guys to get to hear them today. Just beautiful, beautiful songs. of praise and just remembrance of what the Christmas season is all about. So we're going to be in Matthew chapter 2. We're going to start in verses 1 through 12, and I'm going to read 12 verses right here. It's a big chunk, but bear with me, and then we'll just talk about that. So Matthew chapter 2, verse 1 says this, says, Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he who was born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose, and have come to worship him. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. And they told him, In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet. And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among these rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Then Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained them from what time the star had appeared. And he sent to them to Bethlehem, saying, Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, return to me, so I may too go worship him. After listening to the king, they went on their way. And behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And going into the house, they saw the child and Mary his mother. And they fell down and worshipped him. Then opening their treasures, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. So we got this picture, right? The wise men from the east. Now, as I was reading this week, I went into Tammy's office. I said, Tam, I got a question for you. She said, what's up? I said, what happened to the wise men in the west? We only hear about the wise men in the east. And truthfully, it's like, I don't know what happened to wise men in the west. I don't know if they just didn't know about what was going on or what. And we also, during the Christmas season, we think of how many wise men? 3. Because we see the 3 gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. But, as I look at that, I wonder if there weren't more wise men and just 3 of them brought gifts. I wonder if there wasn't a whole caravan of them that went to see this baby. But these wise men, they go and visit this King Herod. And they say, hey, King, there's this baby that was born, and he's going to be king of the Jews, and we want to worship him. Okay, so they told another king they want to go find a baby that's going to be the next king, and they want to worship him. Probably not the best way to handle a situation, but that's what they did. So they say, hey, King, we want to know where this baby is. And it says that Herod and all of Jerusalem was troubled by what they were saying. And so he gathered all of his smart people, his priests and his scribes. He said, hey, we need to figure out where this child was born. And they said, all right, he's born in Bethlehem, there's a star. And he told the wise men, and the wise men said, all right, we're going to travel there. And Herod said, hey, but when you get there and you visit the child and you figure out where he is, come back to me, because I too want to go worship him. And so they leave and they travel, and it says they saw the star and they run into the house, and there was Mary and there was Jesus, and it says they rejoiced exceedingly with joy. And they worshiped Jesus and they praised Jesus, and then at the end it said they gave their gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Such a beautiful picture, but it's also kind of an absurd picture. These are grown men. These are wise men. These guys of higher stature, and suddenly they're bowing before a baby. Are we understanding this? These guys had PhD on top of PhD at the time, and they were bowing to a child that was in a barn. Do we realize the significance of this, church? And so we're talking about this idea of sacrifice, and suddenly we see that sacrifice requires love and faith in something. Okay? And we see this from the wise men because, guys, the definition of sacrifice is the loss of something for a better cause. All right? And the wise men, they sacrificed not only their reputation at the time of being wise men, of being smart individuals, but they also sacrificed their lives because recognize that King Herod said, hey, when you're done, I want you to come back to me because I want to worship the child. But really, what he wanted to do is figure out where this child was so that he could kill this child. Because at the end of the day, that child was going to disrupt his kingdom. That child was going to take him off his throne because, remember, the wise men came and they said, hey, Herod, this baby we want to go worship because he is going to be the king of the Jews. He is going to be the one that we worship. And so Herod had this plan to kill this child. He didn't know where he was, so he told the wise men, hey, Go figure out where he is. And we see that the wise men were told by an angel in a dream, hey, don't go back. And so they don't. They risk their reputation. And guys, they suddenly are risking their lives. Because you best believe if King Herod finds these guys after they disregarded his request, after they went a different direction and they ran away from him, if you think for a second that Herod would have found them and kept them alive, you're wrong. Herod would have killed them in an instant. This guy was blood hungry for the Messiah. And suddenly, they sacrificed their reputation and their lives for this baby, this child in a barn. Guys, they had love for the Messiah, knowing what he would bring. Okay, they knew the prophecies. But they also had faith that God was doing something much, much bigger than they could ever imagine, right? These guys were wise men. They had knowledge of what the prophecies were saying before in Isaiah and Ezekiel and Jeremiah. All these prophets up to this point were saying, hey, this child is coming. His stature is not going to be something fancy. It's not going to be something mighty. He's going to be just a regular dude. But this child is going to change the course of humanity as you know it. And they knew this. They had love for this baby, but they also had faith in what God was doing in the greater scheme of things. Sacrifice requires love and faith in something. So I want to close this point before we go on to our next song with a question. And I want you to hang on to. What is God asking you to sacrifice? What is it? Is it your time? Is it your money? Is it a relationship you probably shouldn't have? Is it maybe a couple hours from work so you can spend it with your family? What is God asking you to sacrifice? Beautiful. What is God asking you to sacrifice for Him? So we move on from the wise men, and we get to the next part of this story, and we're back to the couple. The mother of Jesus and His father. And verses 13 through 15 says this. It says, "Now when they had departed, being the wise men, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. And he said, 'Rise, take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him.' And he rose and he took the child and his mother by night and departed to Egypt, and he remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what the Lord has spoken by the prophet, 'Out of Egypt I called my son.'" Okay, so we have this situation. The wise men leave. Mary and Joseph are tired. They go to bed. And in a dream, an angel appears to Joseph. He says, "Joseph, you've got to get out of town. You've got to take the child. You have to take his mother because Herod is upset." No, that's not what he says. Herod is a little irritated. No, that's not what he says. He said, "Herod is going to destroy your child." Herod is going to destroy your child. So get Mary, get Jesus, and get out of town. So suddenly, we see that Mary and Joseph are not just happy parents now. No. They're fugitives on the run from a king. This girl, remember, she is a girl. I told you guys our first week. This was a teenager. 16, 17, maybe even younger than that. She would have been in my youth group. She's running away with a child from a king who wants to kill this young baby. They're fugitives on the run. They had to sacrifice everything at this moment. And that brings me to my second point, that sacrifice stretches us outside of our comfort zones. You see, suddenly, these happily new parents were on the run. And they had to leave the barn, their home at the moment, to get away from Herod. All right, parents in the room. When you first had a child, was there stress? When your first child, was there stress? Yes. Did any of you have to flee the state? This is a yes or a no. No, okay, thank you. All right, so I want you to picture that stress, okay? That stress of your newborn child. Like you're excited, yes, but like you're not getting any sleep, right? There's so many different things going on. And on top of that, an angel appears to you and says, "Hey, somebody wants to kill your baby, get out of the state." A little more stressful, right? And so suddenly, you're stretched way beyond your comfort zones, right? Mary and Joseph had to sacrifice the comfort of laying low with their child. And guys, not only that, they had to travel nearly 430 miles to Egypt. Now they didn't just hop in the Subaru and hit the road. No. This was either on foot or some sort of farm animal, a camel or a donkey. And remember, they're not rich. He's a carpenter. She's a teenager. And they couldn't get in the inn because it was full, so they had their baby in a barn. So it's not like they had all these animals just to load everything up and head out. They traveled 429 miles. That's how long it is from Bethlehem to Egypt, roughly, with a newborn baby, running from a king who was blood hungry for their newborn child. A little uncomfortable. They had to sacrifice their comfort zones. And oftentimes God calls us to sacrifice stuff that makes us comfortable. We surround ourselves, right, with things that give us joy, with things that bring us comfort. That's all right. That's normal. We have these things in our lives that are our go-to. How many of you guys, when you go home today, have one of those things that you're going to do? You're going to go watch TV. You're going to go read a book. Just one of you. Okay. So the rest of you are real busy today. I'm going to take it. Our crowd participation is wonderful today, guys. We're doing great. But we have these comforts we surround ourselves with. And that's good. That's not a bad thing. But so often, many of those comforts we have in our life can hinder our walk with Christ. Okay? They can. Sundays are made for Jesus. Do you know what else they're made for? Football. That's it. I don't have any ties right now. I don't have a wife or a kid. It's me, myself, and my dog. And you know, we go home, or we eat lunch, and then we sit down and we watch football. We got our Jesus and we got our football. But sometimes, I'll be honest with you guys, that can hinder my relationship with Jesus. I do this thing, and I know a lot of you older folks in here are going to be like, what in the world? And it's not gambling, but it's called fantasy football, okay? And I play this, and you set up your lineup, but it hinders my relationship with Jesus sometimes. Because I'm sitting here, and sometimes, guys, if I'm going to be honest with you, as your pastor, I get on my phone sometimes during church, and I look and I'm like, oh, I got to put that guy on the bench, and I got to put this guy in, because I got to get I have to make sure I win this week. And it hinders my relationship with Jesus. You know, I'm a big gamer, okay? I'm a big nerd when it comes to video games. But sometimes, you know, my video games hinder. I waste hours when I could spend that on Jesus. I could spend that in the Word. I could spend that doing some sort of community work. Sometimes these comforts that we have hinder our relationship with Jesus Christ. I'm not telling you to get rid of your comforts, because I'm sure not going home and get rid of my TV and my Xbox and all these other things. But I'm asking you to consider. Because so many times, stuff that makes us comfortable, stuff that allows us to build a comfort zone around us, hinders our relationship with Jesus. So let me ask you this question. What comfort is holding you back from a fuller relationship with Jesus Christ? And don't say, I don't have one. We all do. What comfort, maybe it's food. That's a big one. I love me some food. What comfort is holding you back from a fuller relationship with Jesus Christ? not a fan of Christmas music. But these guys, they do something special with it. So I really do enjoy this. What is God calling you to sacrifice for Him? And what comfort is holding you back from a full relationship with Jesus Christ? 2 questions I've given you. So we talked about sacrifice of the wise men. We talked about sacrifice of Mary and Joseph. But really, the Christmas season, we talk about Jesus. We talk about a baby that was born in a manger. We talk about wise men and shepherds and angels. And I love that, I do. But at the end of the day, there's a bigger picture. Okay? And the last point I'll make is sacrifice is a lifelong commitment. It is. And Jesus, He embodied that to a T. He showed us that day in and day out. And I told you guys the first week we kicked off the series, I think oftentimes we think that Jesus was just like here, 30 years old automatically, and just started His ministry. And we don't really consider it. Jesus was a baby, and then He was a toddler, and then He was a teenager, right? He went through puberty. His parents had to deal with that. Like Jesus, being fully human and fully God, He walked the same walk that we walk. He was tempted, just like you and I. But He didn't do anything wrong, ever. He was a spotless lamb. Right? He was pure, through and through. And He embodied, throughout His entire life, a lifelong commitment to sacrifice. And we see this because He left home to start His ministry. He gave up His comfort zone of being at home with mom and dad. And then we see that He started being persecuted by the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and He was tested daily. They tried to trap Him in many, many different situations. They say, hey, Jesus, what do you think about this? Hey, Jesus, shouldn't you be doing this? Hey, Jesus, what do you think about this? And He sacrificed, like, this man never had a downtime. Like, He was always going. And when He did have those downtimes, it was at, like, ungodly hours. And if Jesus was a morning person, I felt really, I'm happy for Him, but I'm not a morning person. And you see Jesus time and time again, He got up before the sun rose. And I'm like, that is commitment, Jesus. You sacrifice sleep, and that's something I struggle with. Jesus time and time again sacrificed His time. It said there's many instances in the gospel where it says Jesus' disciples went to go rest, and they got on His boat and they traveled to the other side, and guess what? When they got there, the people were already waiting. Jesus, we need more food. Jesus, we need you to heal us. Like, man, He was constantly sacrificing His time. Guys, Jesus sacrificed His social status. Remember, He didn't call Pharisees and Sadducees and wise men to be His disciples. No, He said, oh, there's a fisherman over there, I'll take you. And a tax collector right there, I'll take you. He picked these people and He hung out with prostitutes and thugs and tax collectors and crooks, and He sacrificed His social status. And I think that's funny because I think we struggle as a church, not just here at First Christian Church, but church as a whole, as we struggle with that. Because, I mean, we don't consider the people that we reach to are going to make us step outside of our comfort zones. I talk to you guys all the time about the homeless ministry we do in Knoxville. And when we first went down there, I was not even ready for what I experienced. The people I came in contact with, whether it be addicts, whether it be people fresh out of jail or prison, or it be gang members, drug dealers, pimps, prostitutes, murderers. Guys, and these people, but I tell you, and I've told you guys time and time again, I've never experienced more Jesus than I did downtown Knoxville in the streets, ever. Those people, they showed me so much about myself. They showed me so much about my faith, and they showed me sacrifice. They didn't have anything, and they would give me anything I asked for. You want the shirt off my back? Here you go. There was plenty of people I'd give a sandwich to. They said, no. I ate yesterday. I don't need anything today. Go give it to somebody else. I'm like, I can see your ribs. I know you're hungry. Eat. But no. Sacrifice is a lifelong commitment. And Jesus hung out with the least of these. And for some reason, we struggle to do that. Because it's uncomfortable. But you remember point 2. You remember Mary and Joseph. They weren't comfortable. Sacrifice stretches us outside our comfort zone. And it's also a lifelong commitment. Matthew 27, verses 45 through 50. Go ahead and throw that up on the screen, guys. Now from the 6th hour there was darkness over the land, and until the 9th hour. And about the 9th hour Jesus cried out with a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani. That is, my God, why have you forsaken me? And some of the bystanders hearing it said, this man is calling Elijah. And one of them at once ran, and he took a sponge, and he filled it with sour wine. He put it on a reed, and he gave it to Jesus to drink. But the other said, wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to save him. And Jesus cried out with a loud voice, and he gave up his spirit. And you say, Shay, this isn't the Christmas message. I want to talk about the baby in swaddling cloth, lied in a manger. I want to talk about the star. And we will, but not today. Because you see, sacrifice is a lifelong commitment. The same baby that we talk about that was wrapped in swaddling cloth and he was placed in a manger is the same man that walked on water. And that same baby that the wise men brought gold, frankincense, and myrrh to is the same man that fed 5,000. And the same child that was left behind in the temple and was left there and taught by teachers and just made the other teachers amazed is the same man that hung on the cross and said, Father, why have you forsaken me? He's the same man that sat in the garden and he got on his hands and knees and he prayed, Dad, if there's any other way, please do not let me die. If there's any other way, please do not let me get tortured. If there is any other way, show me. And I'm so thankful that he didn't stop there, because he continued on. He said, but not my will, God, but yours. He said, God, I know you love these people. And all I can think of is that when Jesus was on that cross, he looked out and he saw some of the same people he healed. And he saw some of the same people that were there at the beginning of his ministry. And he only saw one of his 12 disciples. But as he hung there on a cross and he cried out, I really do think Jesus said and thought to himself, I love these people. I believe in these people. And I hope that these people understand what they are getting. I hope they understand what I'm doing. I'm setting an example. Because sacrifice is a lifelong commitment. The Apostle Paul talks about it all the time. Galatians 2:20 talks about this idea of dying to yourself daily. Paul says, look, I wake up every morning and I know that if I don't say a prayer in the morning, I'm going to live by my own sinful desires. If I don't make a conscious effort in the morning and say, all right, I'm going to die to myself and my fleshful desires and put on the righteousness and love of Christ, then I'm going to mess up. Today is Sunday school. I got to talk with the kids about Jesus and Barabbas. Favorite story in the Bible right now. Favorite story in the Bible, because I see Jesus and I see Barabbas. And I've told you guys this before, but when you look at that story, we're Barabbas. We're sitting there, and Jesus looks out, and they say, Jesus, aren't you going to answer for yourself? And he stays quiet. And Pilate says, Jesus, don't you hear what they're saying about you? Don't you know I can set you free? And then you think back to Jesus' prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane, and you think back to when his disciples pulled out the sword and they struck the guy in the ear, and his ear fell off, and Jesus says, put your sword away. Don't you know that this is my decision? At any moment, I could call 10 legions of angels down, and they would have this covered. And realize it doesn't say that Jesus cried out with a loud voice and died. It said Jesus cried out with a loud voice and he gave up his spirit. It wasn't taken from him. His life wasn't in Pilate's hands. He gave it. He sacrificed himself because he said, I love you. And I want you to know what I want from you is a sacrifice for others. Not just on Sunday when you put a little money in the plate, not just here on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. I don't want a little bit. I want it all. I don't want 25, 50, 75%. I want 100% of you. I told you guys last week, we think about Jesus and this idea, and when I think about Him, I think about us as a house. And Jesus comes in and He says, I'm going to work on this room. I'm going to work on this room. And I told you there's some rooms that I've locked up and I'm like, Jesus, I don't want you to... those make me comfortable. Those are my comfort zones. And Jesus says, no. I don't call you to sacrifice a little bit or 3 rooms. I want you to give me the whole thing because I gave you all. Church, are you willing to have a lifelong commitment to sacrifice? There's 2 groups in here. One of the groups is where most of us land. We've been believers for a while now. And we say, yeah, I've already given that commitment. And maybe you have, but let's be honest. There's ups and there's downs. Sometimes I'm on fire for God, and other days I don't want anything to do with God. Read the book of Psalms. It's great. Because some days David is like, yes, God, you are the best thing in the world. And other days he's like, God, I can't get away from you. And if that's not how you feel, I don't know what is. Because some days you're like, God, you're the best. And other days you're like, God, I don't want anything to do with you. Guys, the group of us that have been Christians for a number of years, here's the thing. There's ups and downs. I gave you three different questions. What is God calling you to sacrifice? What could possibly be hindering your relationship with Christ? I want you to take one of those questions. I want you to run with it. I want you to look into your heart and say, yeah, I should probably fix that. Better yet, look into your heart and say, yeah, I should probably let God fix that. I should give that to God. There's another group of us in here, and maybe you don't know what this Jesus thing means. You come to Christmas, or you come to church once a year, maybe twice, and one of those is our Christmas Day or Christmas Eve service, and you love it because there's the little skit up here and the baby in the manger, and it's a nice, bubbly story. And maybe that's what you were expecting today. And if that's you and you want to know what it's like to have it, what it means to have a relationship with Jesus, what it means to say, I want to be a follower, and not only that, I want to make a lifelong commitment, then come talk to me afterwards. Let's talk about what it looks like to say, I believe in Jesus. I want to make that physical statement, be baptized in the waters of baptism. Come talk to me. And we'll discuss that. Because it's a lifelong commitment. If you need prayer, our prayer team is on the back wall. They would love to pray with you. Sacrifice. Love. Faith. Are you willing to make that lifelong commitment? Thank you, choir.